Welcome to the Holy Post. Today's show is all about perspective. First, Phil offers his perspective on the news stories that fans send him on social media. Stories about Icelandic cucumbers and water buffaloes, and how they compare to the articles he actually likes. Articles about robotic mushrooms and avoiding gluteal amnesia. Then, a recent article explores how our culture's focus on products, practices, and apps designed to increase our happiness actually prevent us from being happy. Then Christine Emba's latest article in The Atlantic looks at why government support and financial incentives have failed to reverse declining birth rates in many countries. She argues the decision to have children isn't really about money, but about meaning. Then Amy Lowe shares about her memoir, The Brave in Between, and the perspective she's gained by living with a terminal cancer diagnosis for 5 years. All of that, plus Mike Erie and I have very different perspectives about holiday decorations. I've got one big announcement before we jump into the show. HOLYPOST Media is launching a brand new podcast with our friend, New Testament scholar, and New York Times columnist, Esau McCauley. Esau's podcast is going to debut on September 25th, and new episodes will be released every Thursday after that. But we need your help. If you want to be part of the launch team for Esau's new show and help spread the word, then head over to holypost.com/launch team. Again, it's holypost.com/launch team, all one word. We're really excited about having Esau on the HOLYPOST Media team, and we're super grateful for all of you who've helped us get to this point and who are going to help us launch Esau's new show in the next few weeks. Okay, here is episode 634.
Hey there, welcome to the HOLYPOST podcast. This is Phil Vischer. I'm here with two people, neither of them named Caitlin. One of them is named Sky Jitani. Hi, Sky.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. Hi. He's kind of chipper. And the other is Mike Erie. Hi, Mike.
I'm not going to interrupt today. So no rabbit trails, no interruptions.
Really?
Okay, we're here.
Huh.
I'm going to do my best to fill Caitlin's shoes. So I'll bring intelligence. I'll bring church stories. I'll bring love of children.
Okay.
So
why?
And just faces of disgust are directed at you, Philip.
Why does the snake bite, Mike Erie?
The snake bites because it was trying to cross the road. I don't know.
No.
Why does the snake bite?
Because it is in his nature.
Oh boy.
I don't think you cannot interrupt, Mike.
Ooh. Oh yeah.
That's a challenge. Yeah, that's a challenge.
All right, watch this. Timestamp this.
In your nature. Okay, here's the theme song. What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Caitlin. Today's episode is sponsored by Our Place. At the Holy Post, we love working with sponsors who want to make the world a better place. We've all been trying to cook healthier, but what if your kitchenware is part of the problem? Most non-stick kitchenware uses forever chemicals like Teflon that are under global scrutiny for their impact on the environment and on us. Our Place is a mission-driven, female-founded brand that makes cookware, kitchenware, and even countertop appliances that are completely free of forever chemicals. Even better, I'm kind of a design buff, and Our Place's pots and pans are the best darn looking pots and pans I've ever seen, honestly. And you've got to see their Wonder Oven, a combo air fryer toaster oven that looks like a work of art. Seriously, you need to check out these gorgeous products. Make your kitchen healthier and way better looking. Go to FromOurPlace.com and enter the code HOLYPOST at checkout to receive 10% off everything on their site. Our Place offers a 100-day trial with free shipping and returns. That's FromOurPlace.com, code HOLYPOST. This episode of The Holy Post is sponsored by Hiya Health. Hey, do you have kids? Do you care about their health? Of course you do. Most kids' vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk kids really shouldn't be eating. That's why Hiya was created, the pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin for kids. 0 sugar, 0 gummy junk, yet they taste great and are perfect for picky eaters. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste they love. And we've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you need to go to hiyahealth.com/holypost. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/holypost and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. And thanks to Hiya Health for sponsoring this episode. Mike, give us the most
I haven't interrupted
interesting.
So I'm
That's
doing
like the
great.
staring contest where you start out by blinking.
That's like the knock-knock joke about
true
the
story.
interrupting cow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
come on now.
That's a good
No,
one.
I got one for you. Seth Erie. This Seth Erie came home with this one the other day.
Yeah.
And you should hear him say it. But why did the banana go to the doctor? Because he wasn't peeling well. Boom.
Oh, that's good.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep. Public school education right there.
Does he make up jokes or does he just collect them and bring them home?
Oh, no. He attempts. He attempts. But yes. Go ahead, Phil. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
You
That's
interrupted
okay.
me.
What's something interesting you did since we saw you last a few weeks ago? What have you been up to?
Well, Phil, my life is nothing but interesting moments. I would say perhaps the most interesting moment is when my wife and I went Halloween decoration shopping. And
soon. It's too soon, Mike. What are you doing that? Just because there's pumpkin spice doesn't mean you have to go get more Halloween decorations.
Nope. We'll top this, Phil. We decorate for Christmas November 1st. What do you think of that?
That's nuts.
What do you think of that, Phil?
Even Jesus doesn't approve of that. Too
Seriously.
early, says Jesus.
Nope. We go November 1. And it's not full decoration, but we start November 1. And then we pull down about January 15th. If I'm gonna do all the work, like we're gonna sit and enjoy it, Phil. So yes.
Okay.
We went to a store here in Nashville that was very beautiful, very pricey, and had a lot of interesting Halloween decorations. And my wife and I don't normally go. I know this is how lame my life is. My wife and I normally don't go.
Is it called Home Depot?
Phil, I'm so disappointed.
Did you get one of those
Kirkland's
12-foot tall skeletons that they sell at Home Depot? Those giant.
No, Phil.
Giant
We're into
Jack
elegance.
Skellington. Oh,
no, man.
Elegance.
This is a pumpkin spice latte fall here. We've moved on from Brat Summer to pumpkin spice fall. So anyway, that was very interesting.
Wait. What is elegant Halloween decorations?
That's a great question. And
pumpkins swaddled in lace.
But that's just fall. That's not Halloween.
Well, let me just the great distinction, Sky. Per usual,
Black lace.
good distinctions.
Black lace.
Let me say in art. That's funny. Yeah. Let me say in our family, we don't carry that distinction between Halloween and fall very well. So fall decorations are Halloween decorations, and Halloween decorations are fall. I know, Sky. I see it on your face. I totally understand. I'm just saying for us. And how dare you judge a man on his decorative preferences?
Oh no, you don't understand. I judged you well before that. Like when you told me you put Christmas decorations up November 1st all the way through
November
January
1st.
15th, I am of the tradition of the liturgy that the Christmas decorations go up the Friday after Thanksgiving, and they are down by January 2nd.
That is awful.
That is it.
So what's it like? How many of your kids are in therapy because of that? I mean, what's it like to live in a house of that little joy? Why would you rob your family of the delightfulness of the holiday decorations?
But every gift of God is made better with boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Except ice cream.
What have we learned from the McRib sandwich? But scarcity makes the heart grow fonder.
Exactly. Well put, Phil.
Yeah,
Christmas is like a McRib.
I have 9.5 months to live without Christmas decorations. So yes, I appreciate them every time.
Are you one of those people though that leaves them lit up through like March?
Nope. No, they're down. They're down. My wife on January 2nd says, "Okay, we're going to start. It's a slow on ramp."
Oh, see this.
So we start November 1st, and then she starts January 2nd. But the nice, listen, guys.
We are more the everything's up in one day, everything's down in one day.
Yeah, see, that's the problem, Sky.
You put one
you're
thing
the reason
up at a day,
we've
like
lost the ability to say Merry Christmas.
like your house is one giant advent calendar.
Oh, dude, totally. Have you seen those? They have them at Costco now. It's the Christmas Vacation Advent Calendar. I'm so in for this.
You know the best one. The
What's
best one is the Die Hard Advent Calendar.
No.
I have.
Yes.
Oh, is that the one with he's falling?
Yeah, it's Nakatomi
that's so
Center, and Hans Gruber is falling, and you lower him every floor per day, and when he hits the ground, it's Christmas Day.
All right, Phil. Can you send me that?
Jesus likes that. I don't think Jesus likes it.
It's exactly what Mary said in the Magnificat about how he brings down
the high. Yes.
Right, yeah. It's very biblical.
Genius.
Mm-hmm.
And so is decorating. Anyway, go ahead, Phil.
It
brings me joy. It sparks joy, Phil. Do you know what that emotion is?
Would it be all right if I...
Do you even know, Phil?
If I advanced the show at this point?
I think it's been very riveting up until this point. I don't know what your problem is.
That's fine. Okay. So we've talked a lot about how one of these days we're not going to talk about politics. And this is that day. This is that day. We've had to talk about politics so much because so much was happening and it was crazy. And I was being accused of being a leftist and taking money from George Soros. And terrible, terrible things that Mike doesn't know anything about because he lives in a bubble where all of his neighbors share his views on theology and politics exactly.
Yeah. We don't share them with each other. Yes. That's the true or not sharing. But yes, go ahead.
So here's what I'm going to do.
Anyway, I'm sorry for those vicious attacks on your character. If you've ever been around Phil, you know he's not receiving George Soros money. You know that. Yeah. Just the way he dresses.
Yeah.
You can tell.
I get my t-shirts at Kohl's, and I often use Kohl's Cash to get them.
Exactly right.
Like Little Orphan Annie. Okay. These are stories that people send me. And we haven't had time to get into any of them because we've been politicking for so long. So I thought, this week we're going to catch up on some of the stories that people send Phil. Yeah. And you have to guess why someone would send me this story. And in particular, why would a lot of people send me these two stories that I'm going to mention? Okay, story number one. And you can buzz in if you're the first one to be able to answer why. Wounded water buffalo that escaped has been located in Des Moines.
Well, first of all, Des Moines is known for its water buffalo, and secondly, aren't you like from around there? Isn't there a Bible camp there that talks about water buffalo or something?
No, that's not it, Mike. That's really not it. Sky?
It's the water buffalo song.
Okay, thank you, Mike. You're not familiar with the water buffalo song?
No, what is it? Would you sing it right now?
Everybody's got a water buffalo. Yours is fast, but mine is slow. Hers was that's hers was.
Dude, no.
Something.
I have one favorite song, and it's not that. It's "Where Is My Hairbrush?"
Obviously.
Okay. So many people sent me this story, and what's most interesting is that a radio station in Omaha, as they were discussing this story, played the water buffalo song. And then discussed.
You get royalties?
And then they had a conversation about, didn't we have that guy on the show years and years ago, the guy who made VeggieTales? What was his name? And they couldn't come up with my name. And then they decided I was Phil Vassar. That's what they came up with. It was Phil Vassar. Yeah. And then for about a minute, they talked about how sad it was that I had died.
Man, you've had a rough couple of months online, bro.
My uncle was listening to this and called in to tell them both that they got my name wrong and that I was not dead. They were searching, they were like Googling to see if I died and were Googling the wrong name. And this was all live on the radio, and it was a major like secular radio station in Omaha, Nebraska. An aggressive and wounded water buffalo that has been on the run since Saturday has been located, and officials are working on a plan to retrieve the animal alive. It was on the run. So somebody...
It was wounded? It was wounded,
It was aggressive, and it was wounded. I don't know, heard itself escaping from the circus.
I get that
the
way.
water buffalo circus.
That was the question.
All water buffaloes.
Where did it escape from?
I don't know.
Why was there a water buffalo in Iowa?
Why not? I think there's lots of animals in lots of places that you'd think. Why is there a kangaroo in Florida? Well, it's Florida.
Okay.
Okay.
Other people can get in on that action.
All right.
Okay, next one. So that's something.
So someone sent you that one.
People send me things like that quite a bit. Here's the next one. You better get this one, Mike. Sky, you're not even going to go. Mike has to get this one. TikTok.
All right, I got it.
TikTok blamed for hit to Iceland cucumber supply.
You're a big fan of salads, and you grow vegetables in your garden. Is that what it is?
That's exactly it, Mike. That is exactly it.
Where is my hairbrush?
Icelandic supermarkets have been left in a pickle after a viral TikTok trend.
Oh.
Get it? See what they're doing there? A viral TikTok trend saw an unprecedented surge in demand for cucumbers in Iceland.
Is it to scare cats?
No, a social media influencer in the small Nordic country began sharing a salad recipe of grated cucumbers, sesame oil, garlic, rice vinegar, and chili oil. The recipe has been such a hit that farmers in the country were unable to keep up with spiraling cucumber demand, leading to widespread cucumber shortage in Iceland.
Listen, Phil.
Yeah.
You're bigger than VeggieTales. Bro, I don't hear cucumber and think of Phil Vischer or Phil Vassar. Neither.
Sadly, Phil Vassar is no longer with us.
Yeah,
let's have a moment of silence for Phil Vassar.
He left too early. He had more, and actually by the end,
he had more to give.
By the end of the segment, they had just Googled VeggieTales creator and had come up with my actual name, and then Googled me and discovered that I'm still alive, and were surprised
and for sale
that I was only 58. They said, "Oh, he's still young."
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of how I feel sometimes post veggies, is that people are surprised that I'm still alive. Is that guy still alive? What has he been doing for the last? Okay, those are the kinds of stories that people send me.
Love it.
All right.
Can I ask a question about the cucumbers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Sky.
Is there any
what's up?
Like danger to the fact that Iceland is running out of cucumbers? It's not like you need cucumbers to ward off scurvy or something. What's the big deal? Like, why can't they just import some cucumbers from Ireland or Scotland or something?
Sky.
Yeah. Or Des Moines.
Sky, it wasn't a crisis. It was just a silly story, Sky.
Oh, okay. I thought there was some real issue here.
A crisis. It's just odd for Iceland to run out of cucumbers because
if Donald Trump were president, they would have plenty of cucumbers.
There'd be a cucumber in every pot.
We're not talking about politics, Mike.
No, what did we just say?
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. You didn't even notice, Phil.
Now, this is the kind of story that I look for. Now I'm going to give two stories that I actually seek out on my own. I am not...
And let's psychoanalyze the difference. Just
go ahead, listeners, pay attention so you can better hone which stories you send to Phil.
Yeah. So, they mentioned a tomato. Let's send it to Phil. Right. They mentioned a cucumber. Let's send it to Phil.
That's right. You're bigger than that, Phil.
Water buffalo. Let's send it to Phil. I mean, I don't mind. It's okay. But 30 people sent me both of those stories, and it just gets old.
Right. If I read about hairbrushes, I'm sending you one.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
the only
that.
Exception.
Engineers gave a mushroom a robot body and let it run wild.
That is a Phil Vischer story.
That's a story. That's worth talking about. Did you know, Mike Erie and Sky Charles Gittani? Wait, Mike's middle name is Stanley. No, you're Charles too. Are you both Charles?
He's
Stanley. Carl. He's Carl.
Carl. That's like Charles.
Carl with a C.
That's
I'm not Marxist.
Short for Charles. Mushrooms have, I don't know if you knew this, Mike, have vast mycelial networks flicking and pulsing with electrochemical responses that can be somewhat similar to those of our own brains. Did you know that? Did you?
No, I've not flicked in a while. So
networks mushrooms have networks of fine fungal threads that respond to changes in their surroundings.
There's a band called Fine Fungal Threads.
Fine fungal thread. As they weave through the soil in search of resources, a number of species even crackle with transmembrane activity that resembles our own neural responses. So they took oyster mushroom, a growth of oyster mushroom. They put it into a little 5-legged robot. They did 2 different experiments. A 5-legged robot that kind of walks like a creepy hand from the Addams Family. So that's not creepy, being driven by the thinking of a mushroom. And then also a little 4-wheeled car.
Yeah, 4-wheeled.
Driven by a mushroom.
Aren't these like levels in Super Mario Brothers?
That's excellent. Oh, Sky. Man,
that is
you look
good.
So handsome today too, bro.
That is good.
Well done.
The team of researchers from Cornell University and the University of Florence in Italy,
of course it's Florence. Of course it's Florence in Italy.
One nation
talking about mushrooms. Let's go.
One nation could not pull this off alone. You need help. You need a transatlantic cooperative. They put
an exchange of membranes.
An exchange of a transmedial crackling. A culture of the edible mushroom species Pleurotus iringi, which is also known as the king oyster mushroom. They put it in control of a pair of vehicles. By growing mycelium into the electronics of a robot, we were able to allow the biohybrid machine to sense and respond to the environment.
I'm in. What could possibly go wrong? I thought AI was the problem. Nope.
No. It's our robot. It's our mushroom overlord.
Our new mushroom overlords.
It's just 1,000 movies, right? In there, the fungus. Did you see the Last of Us, that TV show with Pedro Pascal, the zombie?
Mm-hmm. Oh, Sky.
Oh, because you should, because it was a fungal brain infection.
That's right.
So they actually dramatized it, like how fungal growths burst out of wasps, for example, or the back ends of cicadas, except it was out of people's heads. And it was pretty gross. It was pretty creepy. It was gross. I was going to say it was pretty creepy. Would you say that, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it.
It would be fun to go. You should tell Tim.
Should we do a Halloween episode?
Tim should go trick-or-treating as one of the zombies from The Last of Us with a big fungal growth coming out of his head.
He could pull it off, dude. Yeah. No doubt.
Tim Stafford is Mike's co-host on Voxology podcast. Okay, this is the other kind of story that I flag on my own. Actually, this is kind of a crossover because people send me stories like this and I flag them on their own. Sitting all day can cause dead butt syndrome.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Have you ever heard of dead butt syndrome, Sky?
No, but I can imagine what it is.
He's experienced it in the bathroom. I can tell you that right now.
That got a look from Sky. Mike.
Why isn't this butt news, Phil?
You got a look.
Yeah.
I'm just
saying. I think
I'm not doing an official news of the butt.
Long evangelical confessions.
This isn't an official news of the butt. This is me going through the kinds of stories that people send me versus the kinds of stories that I flag for myself, mushroom robots, versus the kinds of stories that we actually agree on that people send me.
So it's like a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the mesh point right here.
One circle. People think Phil would be interested in this because it said cucumber. Another circle. Phil is interested in this because it's a mushroom driving a robot hand. And in the center, we're all interested in dead butt syndrome. The name might make you snicker, but addressing gluteal amnesia can help you avoid chronic pain. That's not...
Oh my goodness.
That's not a joke. That's the technical...
Sky, no doubt Sky has struggled with this. There's no doubt.
That's the technical term. My butt can't remember where it is. I don't know how to sit.
I have spoken out of my butt, but I don't think I've thought out of it.
That's funny.
The gluteus maximus is one of the strongest muscles in the body and the biggest shock absorbers. If it's not working properly, it can cause a domino chain of issues. Have you ever had a domino chain of issues from your butt?
I have.
Gluteal amnesia happens
after bad cucumbers. Yes,
when the muscles in your rear, too much chili oil in them. Gluteal amnesia happens when the muscles in your rear become so weak from inactivity they seem to forget how to function. If you spend hours sitting, do any of us spend hours sitting?
No,
Sky, no.
Yeah. Yes, I do.
No, that's John doesn't. He has a stand-up desk in the office there, so he's the only one.
Of course he does.
Not,
of course he does.
Yeah,
of course he does.
Can't. I'm surprised he doesn't have a treadmill under it, and he's just running.
It should be
time.
a personality test. If you have a stand-up desk,
yeah, that should be a
tells
personality
you. That's a
test.
tell.
Yeah. If you spend hours sitting, it's important to learn to recognize when your glutes are turned off and how to get them working again. This is an important medical.
Phil, where do you go looking for this? Is there a subreddit for Phil Vischer?
This was in the New York Times. This was in the New York Times. And then they give you instructions for how to reactivate your glutes if you discover that they have become deactivated.
Isn't it just stand up? Do we really need an instruction for this?
If only it were so simple, Sky. If only it were so simple. You can do a test. If you sit regularly for more than 2 to 3 hours at a time, you've probably experienced some degree of gluteal amnesia. The simplest test is to stand on one leg, letting the other dangle. Your glute on the dangling side will feel soft. So you have to feel your glute. This is, I'm sorry, kids. Now put weight on that leg and squeeze the cheek hard. You should feel, and by the way, again, this is from the New York Times. You should feel a subtle firming of the muscle. If your glute is weak, you may need to squeeze a few times before you feel it fire.
To be clear, this is something you should do with your own body, not someone else's.
Yeah, no, you
Thank
don't.
you, Sky.
Okay. You don't check others for gluteal
this is not
amnesia.
I'm gonna check my sweet wife when she comes in. Babe. Hey, babe, you sit all day. You're a teacher.
Listen, here's the thing, though. I fly all the time, and sometimes those are long flights, and you're sitting for hours and hours and hours and hours, and I have never thought to myself, I have gluteal amnesia. What I say
that's exactly what someone with gluteal amnesia would say.
Yeah.
Sometimes my butt falls asleep, but that's different.
There it is.
I don't know. I don't think that's it. That's different.
I think it's different, too.
That's just a lack of blood flow.
All right.
Okay.
I'm moving on.
All right. Phil.
But I just wanted everybody to know that these are the steps I have to take to give us all a break from politics.
Thank you, Phil.
We're grateful.
Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome. Also from the New York Times, if you turned the gluteal amnesia story was a page 1 story. If you turn to page 3, you get this story. The endless quest to max out on happiness. We're going to talk about happiness, okay?
That's where mushrooms come in. But yeah, go ahead.
I don't think doing shows about politics is
are we not maximizing happiness?
A recipe for happiness. Okay. This is written by Jessica Gross in the New York Times. An increasingly crowded field of tools are offering consumers the chance not just to contemplate their happiness, but also to measure it, track it, schedule it, and optimize it. Every app store is overflowing with offerings like the Happiness Planner, Happiness 360 Degrees, and more. Apple's Health app has a mood tracker that you're supposed to toggle to say if your mood is good or bad. There are now thousands of apps that are involved in wellness, mindfulness, and happiness tracking. But she says there's a great deal of disagreement on how even to measure happiness and fairly weak evidence that doing so makes us any happier. Could tracking happiness actually make us feel worse? According to one study published earlier in the fad, frequent texting about happiness seemed to be particularly distressing among those with more negative emotional tendencies. Another study showed that mindfulness training did not improve student mental health in college, and that in fact students at highest risk for mental health problems did somewhat worse after receiving mindfulness training. A University of Pennsylvania professor said, "I think it's a pretty serious mistake to think that what life is about is your moment-to-moment mood. I think that's a recipe for depression and anxiety." And then she kind of goes through the history of views of happiness. Happiness, in the 1990s and in the 2000s, we decided that happiness was meant to be discovered by meditating and from eating and by abandoning the rat race and reading books like Eat, Love, Pray, and then traveling and meditating and checking out and eating lots of pasta. By the 2020s, the happiness gurus sounded more like business consultants connecting happiness with productivity and focus. Workplace wellness initiatives, which studies show have almost zero real benefits to employees.
And they run the risk of gluteal exhaustion. But
exactly. No, amnesia.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, gluteal exhaustion is when you've run too much. You risk that, Sky.
You know, here's what this reminds me of,
Yeah.
especially when my kids were little, and they were cute, and they still liked being with me. You'd have a moment as a family, or you're out. Maybe it's looking at Christmas lights or Halloween trick or treating or whatever.
Halloween decorations.
Right. You're out as a family doing something, and you're enjoying your kids. And sometimes you're just overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude or joy or just pleasantness in the light of your family, your kids, or whatever. And then you decide, I need to capture this moment. So you try to take a picture, and it all goes to hell. Like you're trying to get them to sit still for a picture, and then the whole moment is ruined because you tried to capture it. And after that happened a few times for me, I realized I need to not worry so much about capturing it and getting a picture or something. I just need to enjoy the moment and be present in the moment. And it feels like with happiness, the moment you try to capture it or measure it or log it in some way in some app, it's self-defeating.
Yeah.
It changes by its observation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like Schrodinger's cat.
That's it, baby.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought that's where you're going.
Happiness works on the quantum level. That's
right.
Can you and I become entangled in happiness?
Only in transcendental membrane flickering.
She goes into the history of our views of happiness. For much of Western history, the idea of even the word for happiness was inextricably linked to chance. The concept was so unpredictable, it made sense to only think about happiness in the long view of a complete life. In other words, there's absolutely no reason to believe at any particular moment you should be happy. That is not how the world works. But back up, zoom way back, and hopefully the sum totality of your events and relationships and experiences will have been a good life, and that's happy. But a new idea in the West emerged in the 18th century that happiness was, quote, something that human beings are supposed to have. This is a summation from another professor. God created us in order to be happy, and if we're not happy, then there's something wrong with the world or wrong with the way we think about it. And this is how we get to the idea that, quote, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are inalienable rights endowed by man's creators. So we went from, she says, in Christian tradition, early centuries, Christians were expected to be solemn, pious, and focused on getting to the afterlife. Then they were taught that being cheerful was pleasing to God. And so whereas earlier generations might have experienced guilt over being too happy, it became possible for people now to feel guilty for not being happy enough. Thoughts?
Oh, I have thoughts.
Do you have
Let's hear them.
Well, in philosophy, Sky can back me up on this. There's something called the paradox of hedonism, which is the more you try to pursue pleasure, the more elusive it becomes. And it seems like happiness
squirrels.
Squirrel.
It's like squirrels. The more you try to catch a squirrel.
That's it. Or a chicken if you're Rocky Balboa. But it's like sleep. The more you try to go to sleep, the more elusive sleep becomes. So so it's a version of what Sky was saying. Like the more you monitor happiness, the less you experience it. But I also think the more you make it an aim, the less it's graspable or aimable. And J.P. Moreland, who I studied under at Talbot Theological Seminary, wrote a book called The Lost Art of Happiness. Ooh. And one of the things, thank you, Sky, one of the things that he argues is that happiness used to be a character virtue, that it was tied into somebody who skillfully lived human life. And it got transmorphed into an emotion that's literally dependent upon the set of circumstances around you. And that turn is the reason why.
What caused the turn? Did he say what caused the turn in his view?
Affluence, decadence, and a view of the human, and a view. Well, I mean, everything. We can blame everything on the Enlightenment.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what he would suggest, but I think he points to more recent American phenomena in terms of the embracing of the American dream, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the right of everybody to be happy, those sorts of things. So now you've made it completely dependent on circumstance. And since you can't control that, you can't control your optimizing of happiness or something. So anyway, it was just an interesting backdrop to this discussion to say the reason it's so elusive is because we misunderstand fundamentally what it is and how we get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sky,
Amen.
Yeah.
agree, disagree?
I
Counter?
totally agree. 100% agree. Yeah.
The author called a guy named Kevin Sandler, who since 2018 has been tracking his mood every 15 minutes that he is awake since 2018. He started when he was in high school. He graduated college in 2022, so he's quite young. And people have asked him why he did it, and he said, because he's crazy. I do it because I'm crazy. But what he's discovered is that the single thing that impacts his sense of well-being more than anything else is being around other people. May mean he's an extrovert, but also may mean he has learned
Some would argue the reverse is true.
value of community. For all the supposed happiness-boosting strategies that aren't supported by evidence, one of the few things that might move the needle is social contact. Engaging with other people as our imperfect selves shatters the illusion of control that we have when we're attempting to optimize our moment-to-moment feelings. And that's something that really struck me about the way she went with this article is, it's a discussion of how we've tried to atomize happiness and I want to be individually happy. I want to just walk out my door by myself in a vacuum, happy, and sustain solo happiness. And what, she's concluding with the skillful work of a high school student who started writing down his
Seriously.
Is that happiness happens as a response to being part of a fabric of activity and experience and relationship. And again, if you start thinking about happiness, trying to grab it from, it's like trying to grab the squirrel that just brought you a cupcake. Just accept the cupcake. Don't try to grab the squirrel so you can have all the cupcakes you want.
I've said that for so long.
Yeah.
Just don't grab the squirrel.
Don't grab the squirrel. Grab the cupcake.
Here's what I don't understand. I've read this article too, and there's all this stuff about all these apps and everyone promising like a 10% increase in happiness if you do this system or that process, and mindfulness, blah. And I kept thinking to myself, it's so obvious. It is so obvious what would make everyone happier. Just get a dog. Just get a dog. We have known this for centuries.
You don't need an app for that.
No,
Sky
you don't. I am at least 10% happier when I'm around Steve.
Is Steve your substitute for community? Is that what you're saying?
He is part of my community.
Yeah.
He is a completely giving, loving.
Social contact includes our animal friends. Absolutely.
I just don't get why it's that much of a mystery.
Okay.
Hey,
so we solved the
should do a
happiness
devotional on that.
epidemic.
Somebody said that dogs are
dogs.
proof that God loves us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you spell it backwards,
There you go.
God is proof that dogs love us.
Hey, let's do a happiness check right now. Hold on. Phil, let's do a mood check right now. If you were
7.5.
toggling out of
20.
Either 10 or 100. I'm not going to say
okay,
which.
perfect. Sky.
Oh, I'm at least 8.5.
I'm weird because
Yep.
I get grumpy when I don't have anything to make. Like I'm not making anything. I'm so wired to produce, and it not like just be busy like doing, business work, but actually like I want to craft a song, or I want to craft a story, or I want to animate, two little knights arguing about politics. And so I've been doing that. I have stuff to make right now, and it makes me happier. But I also want to see people every day, which is why rather than just going to my office and then just animating, I go to my coffee shop and say hello to everybody, and I do some email, and then I say, have a good day, everybody. And then I go to my office and animate by myself. And that is a good day, Mike Erie.
That's a great day.
That's a good day. What about you? Do you start your day with people, or do you start your day with just Mike?
Oh, I'm a Just Mike fan. I didn't realize I come across as an extrovert. I am the most introverted person. Like I would be fine if everyone leaves me alone for a week. I would just be so happy. So I need to hoard energy before I engage with people. So, which I've just recently learning. So I don't know. I like just starting with books and thoughts. And Sky, you're probably pretty similar, aren't you?
I am. But Mike, do you have a dog?
No, but I have a Seth.
Wow.
And dude, I'm just saying, like she just trumps your dog.
He's a source of unconditional love.
He really is. It's funny. But no, you might hate this guy, but my wife and I agreed we would do kids or pets. And I know that's blasphemous here. I know.
Oh, wow. We did.
I know,
both
dude. I can
often-
see the respect of Mike meter has gone way down.
Often chaotic results.
Hey, if you can make that work.
Speaking of kids or pets, we're going to transition from happiness to meaning. Christine Emba, who's been on the show and has written a couple of really good pieces, I think, were they all in the Atlantic or only some? This one's in the Atlantic. Wrote a piece that's worth reading. We'll put it in the show notes. The real reason people aren't having kids.
That was good.
Yeah. The facts of the so-called fertility crisis are well publicized. Fertility rates are below replacement levels, I believe now in every Western nation and most developed nations around the world. So governments are kind of freaking out. Among those proposing solutions to reverse the trend, the conventional wisdom goes that if only the government were to offer more financial support to parents,
So lame.
birth rates would start ticking up again. Here's $50. And like in Russia, they've literally done that. We'll give a woman $2,000 per kid. Have more kids. South Korea has spent more than $200 billion over the past 16 years on policies meant to boost fertility, including monthly stipends for parents, expanded parental leave, and subsidized prenatal care. Yet its total fertility rate fell by 25% in the same period of time. If what you are doing is giving you the opposite result of what you want, stop doing it.
Don't chase the squirrel.
Yeah, give us that money and we'll invest it in ways that will maybe inspire people to make babies. France has had the same problem. Even the Nordic countries, with all of their social support, are experiencing sharp fertility declines.
It's the lack of cucumbers.
Christine,
Sky out of nowhere.
Christine, maybe the gluteal amnesia. I don't know.
I think that's a factor.
I don't know. Our glutes may be involved in some way. Many in the current generation of young adults don't seem totally convinced of their own purpose or the purpose of humanity at large, let alone that of a child. Christine suggests that the real need isn't a need for stipends, it's a need for meaning.
Whoa.
And then she references a book called Hannah's Children, The Women Quietly Defying the Birth Dearth. The Birth Dearth, Mike.
Yep.
That's another
The Dearth
band.
of Birth.
That's
exactly.
another band to go along with, what was the first band?
I want to get to the point where I have a dearth of girth, but that's
the Girth
that's
Dearth.
a different band name.
The Girth Dearth. Yes,
Haven't had that
Catherine Ruth Pakaluk, an economist and the Catholic mother of eight.
There we go.
8.
Yep.
Compiled
That's
interviews.
worth a bell. Sky, that's worth a bell.
No, it's for brands.
That's
It's
for brand
okay.
placement.
Brand, Mike.
Okay, Old Navy.
You got, yeah.
Okay,
Compiled interviews with 55 women from across the
JC
United
Penney.
States. 55 women. Mike, this is no
55,
interrupt.
sorry.
No interrupt day.
Yep.
55
Okay, I'm
women
sorry.
from across the United States who have 5 or more children. Connecting the author and her unusual subjects is a shared certainty that children are an unqualified good and that raising them is an activity freighted with positive meaning. No amount of money or social support will inspire people to have children, not unless there is some deeper certainty that doing so makes sense, that it has a purpose. So, then she dives into how have we lost that sense. If people are going to have children, they need more than a hunch that human life is valuable. It's not just the possibility of goodness, but its actuality that fuels our deepest longing to ensure a human future. But to some people today, to assert the goodness of one's own life is to risk coming across as privileged or just hopelessly naive. But for the women that were having the most children that she interviewed, when meaning is deeply internalized, many children tend to result. And according to these women, bring joy with them. Have you found yourself more joyful with more children? Like if you teach Sunday school, or if you have a birthday party at your house and there's 25 6-year-olds.
Phil, let me jump in on this, man. I believe that children are our future.
Yeah.
Love them and let them lead the way. Show them all
well.
the beauty
I
they
believe
possess inside.
Teach them well. Isn't it teach them well?
Teach them well.
Yeah. I don't know.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is I thought perhaps in your article selection genius, you had paired these articles because they were related.
Yes.
So I was reading the second one going, oh, well, the happiness one makes sense of this one. And I thought that Phil.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's amazing.
So,
And you know what, Mike? I do this every week. Every week. I put it together every week. Sky.
I loved Emba's article. I just thought it was so brilliantly done. And I had a conversation with David French about this on some French Friday. Not this article, but this issue of low birth rates and all the efforts in different governments to incentivize it. But don't you think it's interesting that we see this declining birth rate in all of the cultures where there is also declining religious affiliation? Because religion, especially Christianity, has, from its foundation, reinforced the goodness of life, the value of human life, the importance of having children, and the blessing of humanity to the world. And when that's gone, when that personal sense of intrinsic value, the goodness of life is gone, despite suffering, despite injustice, despite brokenness in the world, there is this overwhelming message that life is good and God is good and there's meaning and purpose in the world. When that's stripped away, and then you add into the mix this sort of secular philosophy that says humans are a problem and humans are destroying the planet and humans are a scourge on everything else in creation. You put all that together, and it's not surprising to me that you get people who despair about their own value and their own meaning and purpose, and then they're unmotivated to want to have more people or create more people who will live in the same existential dread that they experience. So, it's just fascinating to me that we've created this perfect storm of de-religiosity and escalating secular philosophy that devalues human presence in this world, and this is what you get.
Right. Christine Emba ends the article like this: but meaning is not something governments can easily provide. It tends to stem.
Understatement.
Tends to stem from uniting in the face of undesirable crises, or from the sorts of broadly enforced norms, religious or cultural, that many of us no longer share. If falling birth rates can be attributed to a loss of meaning, the question then becomes if there can be any government-based solution to fertility decline. People debating whether to have children seem to be seeking certainty that life is a good thing, that more life would be better, and that assistance, if needed, will arrive. Government can do the last part. They can provide assistance, but the first two assurances that life is a good thing and that more life is better than less life have to come from another source.
Yep.
Ooh.
Which leads me to, what's the church doing?
Well, okay. I mean, this gets to the first book I ever wrote, The Divine Commodity, about the intersection of consumerism and Christianity.
Hold on. Can we get a bell for that?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Consumerism basically says to people, the meaning of life, the purpose of life is the fulfillment of your personal desires.
Yeah. Happiness.
And having children, especially newborns and young children, is a major impediment
Totally.
to the fulfillment of your personal desires. And I've heard celebrities and others give this rhetoric about how it's better to not have children because they get in the way of your personal fulfillment and desires. So again, you can see why there's this movement against having children, because it's directly in competition with the values of consumerism. The problem is so much of the church in the West has adopted the very same tactics as consumerism to try to appeal to people's religious instincts. Come follow after Jesus because he will help you fulfill your desires and dreams. He will get you that thing you really want. It's kind of the health and wealth prosperity stuff, and it comes in different varieties, but it's the same message. God exists to help you fulfill your desires. And if he doesn't help you fulfill your desires, well, then there's something wrong with your faith. And it's all completely bogus. And it doesn't send the message of Orthodox Christianity, which is life still is good and has meaning and purpose, even when your desires are not being fulfilled in the short term. Just like having children is good and right, even if the process of having children and raising them is not always immediately satisfying to your personal desires.
Right.
There's a bigger vision of the meaning and blessing of this than moment-to-moment satisfaction.
It's funny because up on the left, we have some people saying humanity is parasitic. And so creating more humans is a sin, effectively. Some people on the right are saying we need to have as many children as possible so that we have more voters to outvote those parasitic people on the left. So we're both looking at it really just materially, entirely materially. And we try to define happiness off social media, which cannot capture any existential happiness, any transcendent happiness. It can only capture food and places. And so we try to define happiness by what we're eating and where we visited, and could take a selfie while we were there while eating something amazing to project. And it's virtue signaling, but it's happiness signaling. It's look how happy I must be because I was at this place eating this food. And the kind of transcendent happiness, like I this actually did involve food, but 2 nights ago, we had our 2 grandkids over, and we went out in our backyard and we picked raspberries because we have raspberry bushes in our backyard. And we got enough raspberries that we came in, and one of them's 4 and the other one's 7. And we each got a scoop of vanilla ice cream, and we dumped our raspberries that we just picked on top of vanilla ice cream, and then we mushed it all up. Mush, 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 mush. And we made raspberry ice cream with fresh hand-picked raspberries. And that was the kind of transcendent moment, like that just a picture of the ice cream wouldn't capture. But that's all I could. I can't show people the joy of that moment of sitting with your grandkids eating raspberry ice cream that you just made from raspberries you just picked yourselves. But because we don't see those moments, and we become such a visual culture driven by media. And it used to be, this is why I hated shows, honestly, I reacted very negatively to shows like Seinfeld and Friends, because they portrayed a completely consumptive lifestyle as a model for adults. That there was this, that we had decided this moment in our growth cycle where we have the freedom of adults, but not the responsibility of adults. So when you're full-sized and you leave the house, and you can get a job, and you can drive. So you can have money, and you have a car, and you have an apartment, and you can make your own choices. That used to be a very slim window of time before you then launch into family building and, building a legacy. And now we try to sustain that as long as we can, so that you've got celebrities that are 60 and they're still living the way people lived right after college. And we hold them up as the models for happiness. So I don't know how you get back to a point where you value actually continuing the human race rather than just eating really fancy omelets on a Sunday morning.
I want to hear Mike on this too, but I think the dilemma is we've taken that consumptive value system that you've described, Phil, and we've even applied that to having kids. Where, think about the way our culture thinks about marriage. Your spouse exists to make you happy. And when he or she ceases to fulfill your desires, you're justified in ending that marriage or getting a new spouse. And there's rhetoric out there about, well, you should have kids if having those children makes you happy. Well, again, it's a consumeristic, transactional view of parenting or having children. And I'm sorry, but there are all kinds of moments in parenting where a child is not going to make you happy. And if that's our rubric for deciding whether or not to have children, we're losing the narrative, right? There has to be something more intrinsic that this child, these children, this spouse, I am called to love and care for and nourish regardless of my momentary happiness, because there is a greater purpose behind it all. There's a greater meaning behind it all. And the happiness is not a momentary feeling, but it is that deeper soul satisfaction that comes from fulfilling my God-given purpose in this world to parent these children and love my wife.
Right.
And that's the narrative that's lost in consumerism. It only looks at, am I happy right now?
Okay, Mike. Mike, you've got 12
Yep.
children. You've got 3 wives. You are an Old Testament patriarch.
Oh, I'm so happy. Yeah.
What do we do? You're a pastor.
Yeah.
You're up in
Yes.
front. You're looking out at
Yes.
young adults who are trying to decide, am I supposed to live Seinfeld or am I supposed to live the Waltons? And the fact that
Right.
I can't come up with more recent examples is
That's telling. That's telling.
is
Yes.
a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
How do you inspire people that life is worth continuing, even if it
come
sucks?
on now. Come on now. Well, you've already identified the 2 ditches, right? On the one hand, we don't want to so idolize the nuclear family that divorced people and widows and widowers or single folks don't feel in any way, shape at home in our church communities. And on the other hand, we don't want to paint a picture of adulthood that it fits exactly what you were describing, Phil. So for me, I'm with Sky on the sense that you trace this back to a gospel that literally is fleshed out only in individual terms, for my benefit and at very minimal cost to me. And from there, it is quite natural to disciple everybody into an ethic that exists where even the community of faith exists to help me fulfill my ambitions. And so many of the mega churches that I'm aware of actually play to that, right? It's the felt need sort of approach to ministry. Jesus makes you have a better life, better business. Here's what a godly man looks like, or a godly woman. And all of that treads on this very, very distorted view of the gospel. Jesus said it so well: if you want to save your life, you have to lose it. And that is the paradox of everything that we're talking about here. To lose it means you're being swallowed up into something bigger than yourself. Those are my moments of transcendent happiness, when I'm not even aware that I'm happy. In that moment, I'm swallowed up outside of myself into something far larger. It didn't even occur to me to capture it because I'm so immersed in it. And so all of these symptoms that we've been talking about kind of hang on or are evidence of the root of our, malformation to think that this whole deal is about me, for me. And so anyway, I'm with Sky on, unless we get the gospel right, it's hard to correct downstream the distortions that come when you've messed up the very beginning of the story.
Right. All right. We can fix it, Mike, Sky.
We're gonna.
We can.
I've got 3. Sky, how many do you have?
I got 3 and a dog.
Yeah.
I got 3.
That's 15% of happiness right there.
I got 3 and
10
I had
to
2
dog,
dogs.
5 the
I had
kids.
3 and I had 2 dogs.
What?
And at
You
one
win.
point we had 3 ferrets. At one point we had 2 rats. At one point we had a snake. What else have we had? Like everything that my kids pointed to, my wife was in serious danger of bringing home. It was.
Yeah.
We never had bunnies, but we had just about everything else you could find at the local pet store.
No, that's a good song. The bunny song, that's a killer song.
Thank you. So if you see a news story about a bunny, I really want to hear about it. So send it to me. Thanks, Mike Erie. Thanks, Sky Jitani.
Oh, I love you guys.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Go to holypost.com. Check out my little political cartoon. It's kind of fun. And I'm making another one right now that'll come out shortly. And
So you're
will.
happy.
Yeah, so I'm happy. I'm in my happy place. I need raspberries, grandkids, and a lot of time to myself to animate. And I'm a happy guy. Okay, see you next week. The Holy Post is sponsored by Faithful Counseling, I'm not super good at people stuff. I like ideas and technology and puppets. When Lisa and I got married, it was a shock to see just how different we approach the world and each other. The thoughtful gift of marriage counseling from one of our parents was a huge help in those early years. Faithful Counseling can help you get through life's rough spots with more than 3,000 licensed therapists across all 50 states. Faithful Counseling makes it easy to find a great therapist that'll work for you. You can meet over video or phone sessions, and changing therapists is easy and free until you find the right fit. So don't struggle alone. Let Faithful Counseling match you with a licensed therapist who can help you grow into the best version of yourself. Visit faithfulcounseling.com/holypost and get the professional, faith-based counseling you need. And there's a special offer for our listeners. Right now, you can get 10% off your first month at faithfulcounseling.com/holypost. Thanks again to Faithful Counseling for sponsoring this episode. This episode is sponsored in part by World Relief, the Christian humanitarian organization we trust to boldly engage the world's greatest crises in partnership with the church. Many of you have compassionate hearts toward the 120 million men, women, and children who've been forced to flee their homes. But I wonder, how much do we really know about mass displacement and its impact on families and children? I'd like to invite you to test your knowledge with a short quiz from World Relief at worldrelief.org/holypost. Along with the quiz, you'll have an opportunity to grow in your understanding of refugee resettlement with World Relief's free Intro to Resettlement e-learning course, a short, self-paced resource with a ton of great information about the global context of resettlement, the process of resettlement within the U.S., and the role of organizations like World Relief. If you feel the weight and urgency of the displacement crisis or just want to learn more, then take the quiz today and get your free e-learning course too. Head on over to worldrelief.org/holypost or look for the link in today's show notes.
As you'll hear in today's interview, when I first got a copy of Amy Lowe's memoir, I was not excited to read it. It's not the kind of book I'm naturally drawn to, but within a few pages, I was hooked. In fact, I finished it in one sitting. I could not put it down. The book is called The Brave in Between: Notes from the Last Room. 5 years ago, at age 48, Amy was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. The book is about her journey in what she called the last room of her life. It's raw, it's funny, it's full of faith and wisdom, and it's incredibly and bravely honest. Amy Lowe is the managing director for fellowships and nonprofit journalism at Emerson Collective. She's a natural and gifted storyteller, as you'll discover in our conversation, and she writes on her Substack called Postcards from the Mountain. Here is my conversation with Amy Lowe. Amy Lowe, welcome to the Holy Post.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to talking to you. I read your new memoir, The Brave in Between, and it's a really beautiful, challenging, transparent book about where you are in your struggle with cancer, to just get people on the same page, and many who haven't read your book yet. Bring us up to date on what is your diagnosis and how are you doing with it right now?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I was diagnosed a little over 5 years ago with stage 4 metastatic colon cancer. It was a shock in that I did not have any traditional symptoms. I'm the first in my family to have any kind of cancer, and I was actually feeling fine. And I say that because this is my little reminder to everyone. This is the second leading cause of cancer death in the U.S. When I was diagnosed, I was too young to be screened. I was 48. You can get screened now at 45. Best birthday gift you can give yourself. Get screened at 45. It's a super preventable cancer, but in my situation, that wasn't an option for me. So, as you can imagine, the news was devastating. I have been at this now for over 5 years. At the time, and it's still basically true, the statistics for surviving stage 4 colon cancer are about 5 years is about 14%. So I am well aware that I am part of a very lucky small group that is still here and still gets to talk about it. And a lot of things in my story are true at the same time. I am still very, very much in the thick of it. I have gone through, let me think, 2 surgeries, multiple forms of radiation. Oh boy, well over 50 rounds of chemo. And I am happily doing pretty well right now, but my prognosis, unfortunately, is not good. I'm on the last line of a chemo drug that is meant to kind of keep things stable for some patients. It's a few months. For some patients, it's a year or two. And what I'm really hoping for is another trial, some kind of a miracle that might change the trajectory. So it's a fascinating spot to be, where most days I feel pretty good. I can be tired, I can be run down. And yet I live with this awful reality that I exist in what I call in my book, what I call the last room. And so it's a duality that at first was very unsettling. And now I've learned that there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from that.
Yeah. Okay. A couple things. First of all, I'm glad to hear that you're presently feeling well and doing well. I'm also grateful to hear you calling people to get screened. There is a dramatic rise in colon cancer,
Yeah.
especially among younger people. I had my first
Yes.
colonoscopy a couple of years ago. Grateful for that. It's not as difficult as people sometimes fear it is. So if anyone's
Yeah.
hearing this, please go do that who hasn't. And no doubt everyone in our audience has either had a direct experience with cancer or someone in their life that they care about deeply has. And so we are all touched by this disease and understand how devastating it can be. All the more reason why I'm grateful for your book and the transparency with which you write about it and incorporate your faith into it. But let's talk about what you mean by the last room a little bit. And this whole metaphor of different rooms in general. One of the things that struck me about your book is your faith is central to it. And you use this verse from Philippians 4:8 as sort of the skeleton for the whole book. But it's very accessible to somebody who doesn't have a faith. Explain your own background and why you wrote it in this way to navigate the rooms of those who live in the world of faith and those who don't.
If you read the book, you'll find I probably can't get through a paragraph or two without some kind of a metaphor. So I'm kind of a metaphorical thinker. I see the stories of our days and our months, as sort of visual places. A friend of mine once said, the power of a metaphor is it's a vessel that can hold ambiguity. And it's a place where we can wrestle with that nuance that gives you kind of some grounding. So as I moved through the first months of my diagnosis, one of the surprises was, because I thought, well, this is really bad. I'm probably only going to have a few months to live. I have to get my affairs in order. And I didn't have any experience with cancer. And so in my mind, I thought it was like movie cancer, where I was going to be really, really sick and people were going to come and say hi and I was going to sip on ice chips. And I thought it was going to be terrible. And it certainly was awful, and it has been awful. But one of the surprises was, well, a lot of this living through the treatments, as it turns out, my days were kind of normal in an odd way. Like, you still had to buy milk. You still had to get your daughter to dance class. You still had to go on college visits with my son. I mean, the rhythm of life continued. But I held this just visceral truth that I thought, well, look, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm in the last chapter of my life. And I thought, well, it's not so much a chapter, it's a room. It's a place of living. It's a place of struggle. It's a place of joy. And I looked back over the course of my life and I thought, well, I can look at my life as a series of rooms. And so how my faith folded into this is that, I was just one of those really fortunate kids that I grew up in a really vibrant Christian home. My dad was a pastor, kind of both in parachurch ministry, but also eventually as kind of a full-time pastor in the Presbyterian church. And I grew up in a home that cared deeply about the core virtues of Scripture. And our home was a welcoming home. We had people from all kinds of backgrounds and disciplines and interests that were just part of the rhythm of my life. And so my parents did a really lovely job of keeping our world very big and keeping us true to what I call kind of the core kind of social justice tenets of the Christian faith. But I remember my mom once saying, look, I want you to be as comfortable in a room at church as you are at a dinner party with a number of people who don't hold a faith. Like
Hmm.
that sense of kind of elegant movement is, I think, one of the most winsome ways that faith people can be as invitational as possible. And so that was just sort of the lovely kind of hard wiring I got as a kid. As I moved into my college years and my professional adult years, what I found was I actually loved the fact that I was somebody who held very kind of core Christian faith convictions. But in many respects, I was actually happier spending time with my non-faith friends because oftentimes I learned the most from them. They challenged my thoughts. I found that I laughed more. I mean, I just thought, I'm so lucky that I'm somebody who can kind of move effortlessly through a Sunday morning spending time at my church and with my church friends, and a Monday evening going out to drinks with my work friends. And both to me felt like there was a real harmony there. And that was sort of a consistent through line of all of the previous chapters of my room, whether it was, my high school years or my professional time in my 20s while I lived in DC and New York, getting married, having little kids. We all have these different chapters of our lives, and I thought of them as rooms. So here I was living in what I knew was more or less the last room, and I thought, okay, here's something unusual about my situation. First of all, spoiler alert, we're all going to be in the last room. Hopefully your listeners may know that, but if they don't, I promise it's going to happen. It's just the most human part of our lives. Now, listen, if you are really fortunate, and this is what we all aim for, if you're really fortunate, you will enter the last room very tired. Your knee has hurt for 6 years. You're so fatigued. And here's the thing, you're there, which is to say, maybe you're 90. Hopefully you've got good care, you've got good community. But let's be honest, you're very aware every day you wake up, you think, this is like a last room time. That's if you're fortunate. That's what we all aim for. A lovely doctor friend of mine once said to me, you have to understand, my job as a physician is to make sure all of my patients die of old age. Isn't that beautiful? And it's so simple, but I thought, you just distilled it down to like one sentence. Okay, so those are the super fortunate folks. There are others in the last room who feel great. They're living their best life. They have no idea they're there, which is to say that tomorrow they might be riding their bike and they're going to get clipped by a car and we're going to lose them. And we had no idea at all that they were in the last room. Okay, so there's different forms of this, but there's sort of two broad categories. I'm in kind of an unusual category in that I know I'm there. Most days I actually feel pretty good. That's unusual because I don't really want to be there. I'd rather be in an earlier room. I have no idea if my room's going to last another year, another 5 years, another 10. I have no idea. But my situation is pretty dire and I get it. And yet I have this wild duality of I get up and I'm like, I feel pretty good today. And I may only have a few months to live. That is a wild vantage point. And what I realized is there are elements of my Christian faith that may teach me something about living in that last room. And I wonder if, in the way that I do, and I wonder if there might be some postcards I could send back to earlier rooms that could be helpful to others.
Yeah, at one point in the book, you refer to this last room as holy ground. Mm-hmm. Explain why. What do you mean by that? Is it the perspective piece that most people, Jesus says, we do not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from our Heavenly Father. Like there's this fragility. We have no control, right? We don't know many times when we're in that last room or not. But you have that awareness. Is that what makes it holy ground? It's the perspective that you've gained?
Yes. And also this just beautiful gift of urgency, that there's nothing abstract now about my days. Every sentence matters. Every decision matters. Every joke matters. Now, I'll tell you, intellectually, that can get really heavy. You can get really exhausted quite fast by holding that conundrum. However, to be in essentially the prime of my life, I'm 53, to know that I'm there, to have the benefit of most days being pretty okay, although I had a pretty tough summer. If you don't listen and really pay attention to the contours of this room, you are squandering one of what I think is the most sacred elements of the human experience of all. Now, I really wish I was part of that first group that got to be 92 and like, well, it's okay. My time has come. I mean, I have a dear friend who actually is 93, and I marvel at her because she is at such peace with being in this room. I'm not in a lot of peace. I would rather scamper out of here. It is not right. And yet I'm here, and I thought, well, this is where faith becomes so alive, because these kind of beautiful admonitions that we have from Scripture that reminds us this is not your world. This is a way station to the grandest room of all, which is a forever room. And yet you're called to be alive. We are people who are meant to cling to life. So live, cling to every moment. But understand that you are on your way to eternity. In previous rooms of my life, I thought, that sounds pretty good. That's great. In the last room, it's like, there are days when I'm so terrified and days when I'm so delighted. And there's just wisdom in every corner. And so I do think it's holy ground. It's true for all of us, as you said. For me, it's just viscerally true. It's not sort of dinner conversation true. I'm still obviously working with these questions, but I thought, look, if I don't really grapple with this, boy, you don't want to waste that kind of chapter of your life. It's too important.
Okay, so I got to get a little bit honest with you. When I first received your book, I was not excited about reading it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because the topic is obviously a really heavy topic. That's not what deterred me at first. I've been in the Christian publishing world long enough, both as an author and as an editor, and done different things. And I know that when sometimes these books come out around these kinds of heavy topics, they can be very sentimentalized.
Mm-hmm.
And you see everything through this gauzy kind of happy Christian comforting framework. And I thought, oh, maybe that's what this is going to be. That's not what this is. I write a daily devotional. I've been doing it for 10 years. I've been going through a series in the Psalms. And one of the things that has struck me about all these months I've been in the Psalms is how brutally transparent and honest they are. They're not all celebratory. They're not all Thanksgiving. There's a lot of anger and grief and pain and lament and vengeance, all these weird emotions that are really transparent. And reading your book, I was struck by how at times you are really uncomfortably honest about this room and the things you're experiencing there. You've said it. You are being super intentional in this room and what you're choosing to do and how to spend your time. Why have you taken so much time in recent years to put a book like this together? And why have you decided to be as transparent and honest as you are in this book?
Yeah, I love this question. Well, a few things. Certainly when you get really sick, wonderful people show up. And that's great. Now, my world, which is this beautiful hybrid of faith people and non-faith people and people who aren't even sure, what they believe, all showed up. This sort of messy, beautiful, very eclectic set of individuals. And one of the things that I observed straight out was, I got to tell you, the most courageous people who want to hang out in the last room with me are the ones who enter into conversations like this. Okay, what are you most afraid of? What's the hardest part? Do you want to talk logistics? Do you want to figure out who's going to pay your taxes after you die? Okay, no one wants to talk about those things. Those are so hard. Now, I love my Christian friends, but oftentimes my faith friends came in with an opening bid of, we believe in a big God. We believe in miracles. My cousin had terrible cancer and he's doing great now. I love that you have such great doctors. There is a bright sideness to our Christian tradition that actually comes from a very beautiful place of hope and of belief. And we don't want to dismiss that. So you have to appreciate that was as a gift. And yet what I found was it was mainly my Christian friends who had the hardest time sitting down at what I call the brave table and say, let's actually talk about the hardest parts. We're going to pray like crazy. And God's going to answer these prayers in ways that could be exactly the way we wanted or in radically different ways that we never saw coming. There may be crazy amounts of pain inside the story, and there is no way that God is being unfaithful. And one of the things I remember saying to a friend of mine a while back was, often I think the most honest prayers are the prayers of lament and of just fatigue and surrender. And they are no less faithful than the prayers of celebration or for petition. And I said, I don't know that if in our current tradition, at least in our American Christianity tradition, we hold the sacredness of lament the way that we ought to. And so the reason Brave is in the title of the book is this is a book for readers that are saying, okay, let's go ahead and grapple with the hardest parts. And in no way are we diminishing God's providence. I will tell you what, I had a very hard time with what you call kind of the gauzy, God has a wonderful plan for your life kind of books, even if you're super duper sick. I found that off-putting. I found that harmful. Some days I found that cruel. And I thought, no. What's happening here is I believe deeply in a God who walks alongside those who are in unbearable pain. And that's what our Savior reminds us of, is this is going to be really, really hard. And we're going to learn together and we're going to walk alongside. And I just don't know that I think we've lost a little bit of our language in that space. And I thought my story, which is often, there's a lot of humor in this. There's a lot of levity. I exhale a lot. But it's also just living with that kind of messy middle that I think is actually one of the most beautiful places of all. I'll just end with just a little anecdote that really opened my eyes to this, because there are a number of other last room people who've lived the way I am. One of my last room heroes is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who many of your listeners may know, as part of the resistance during World War II. He was a very devout Lutheran pastor, and he was part of the resistance because his faith called him to see the evil rising around him through the Nazi Party and through Hitler. And he said, well, no. See, that can't exist with my faith. See, it just can't. And there was a clarity that he brought to that is just, we all hope that we be that person. I don't know that all of us can be, but we all want to be Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Well, so he was in prison, feeling probably physically pretty good, but he knew the walls were closing in. He was getting signs that, this wasn't going to end because he was part of the assassination plot. And we have all of this gorgeous correspondence that he sent to his fiancée and his best friends and his parents. And so you really can see what a last room person is struggling with. And he gets this word from his lawyers, I think, who basically said, look, there's not much more we can do here. Like, this is really getting bad. And what he says in one of his letters is, okay, God meets us in the facts. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to come to this place. We're going to be clear-eyed about the facts, and God is going to be present in the facts, even if they're terrible. And that was one of those moments where I thought, yeah, that's what the last room, if you're going to sit down and have a meal in the last room, God's going to meet us in the facts. And you got to be brave. You have to really be okay. And that was one of those jumping off points for me with the book.
Yeah, it's a beautiful anecdote in the book as well. And it brings to mind something else you wrote. This is a quote. You say, the most terrifying element of all within the last room is randomness. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there are facts, there are things that happen, but it's when we don't see the connection between those facts that present some kind of pattern or narrative or meaning, the sense that what if it's all just random?
Yeah.
That's where the fear and the terror comes in.
Yeah.
What have you done and what are you doing to combat that fear of randomness? What helps you give a sense that God is meeting you in the facts and that there is meaning in what could otherwise be seen as a meaningless suffering?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, if my Christian friends got a little sloppy on the like, I think this is all going to work out. My whole church is praying for you. You're on the list. It's going to be great. I'm being a little cartoonish, but you had that wing of conversation. My non-faith friends, not too many, but one or two came from a very different place where they'd look at me and say, well, this is like totally unfair. I mean, I can't believe how random this is. I mean, you're not the type of person who gets sick, it just like, it doesn't make sense. And by far, that was the most crushing thing that I heard, because I thought, well, look, I mean, if this is just arbitrary pain for its own sake, that is the loneliest, most untethered, most terrifying space intellectually that you can hold. And the great gift of my Christian faith is a deeply held set of beliefs that all of our relationships, all of the rooms of our lives, all of the decisions that we've made, whether they've been really thoughtful or really reckless, have deep meaning, have deep purpose. And we are part of a much larger story. Now, some of us are lucky enough to kind of see the contours of the story and they realize, oh my goodness, I sort of know why I was put on this planet. I'm living the story I was called to live. Most of us, though, are moving through fog, and we're trying to sort out, what is the story that God has written for my life, and am I being faithful to it? Now, for me, the story turned a couple of times that were deeply tragic. And that your first impulse is to say, well, why in the world would God give me a terrible story? And see, one of the things I've learned through the last room is, well, that's actually not the case at all. First of all, of course, there's going to be terrible times. I mean, the epitaph of my book is a beautiful line by Frederick Buechner, which is, here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. So, of course, terrible is going to happen. That's the whole point. If you read scripture, the disciples are flailing around because they don't understand a terrible day. That is the point. You're going to have terrible days. The admonition then is, don't be afraid. Well, the most terrifying thing of all is to find out that there's no meaning to this. So I will say this, because once you work with this question, you get into some pretty tricky spaces. Where you don't want to lead with that is to say, well, then look, everything has a reason and it's all going to sort of sort itself out. And someday you'll see the bigger space of all. No, that can be harmful. I don't think that's quite right. What I do think is right is to name the pain. Say, this is terrible. We don't really know what's going on here, but we're not leaving you. And we're going to stay where this story leads. And so the word that I use is purpose. This has great purpose. And while it might result in some awful, awful string of times in deep trauma, I've got a 21-year-old and 19-year-old. They are way too young to lose their mom if my story takes an awful turn in the months ahead. It's terrible. And yet they are part of a much larger story that may equip them with a level of empathy in their 30s that very few friends of theirs in their 30s will hold. Now, that's a mystery we have to hold. Should they have to pay that price? I don't know that I want them to. But I am somebody who wants to embrace and celebrate that mystery. I will say this. For my non-faith friends who feel entirely comfortable with the randomness of it all, what I have said to them is, look, I just want to challenge you with something. What you're saying is actually also an expression of faith. Now, you're putting your weight down on what you might call randomness, a grand, I don't know, black hole accident where atoms were sprayed and all of a sudden people existed. You can do that, and a lot of people do. But I just want you to understand, you're putting extraordinary faith down on a cosmic accident. And if you don't think that's faith, you haven't really worked with the question. Now, I got to tell you, my faith isn't that big. I could never go that far, but you can. And I'm kind of in awe of that. I can't, but don't for a second say you don't hold faith. No, you do. It's just, It's a faith that's not tethered to our humanity. It's not a space I could go because it's just frankly asking too much of me. Instead, there's a much bigger story at play here. And I have had an extraordinary amount of the beautiful, and I am existing now in a deep well of the terrible. And both have great value.
Well, that's a statement of faith for sure. I think when I was a seminary student, I served as a student chaplain at a hospital and obviously had to be in the rooms of many people facing really difficult situations. As a pastor, of course, people come in with all kinds of challenges. And the most frequent question you get is why?
Yeah.
And as a younger pastor, I always felt terrible when I couldn't give people an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, I've realized there's a blessing in not being able to give the answer. And I think that's the gap between us is there's some people who are just looking for the why.
Yeah.
And what I heard in your book and in your story a lot, you certainly asked that. But you've come to this place of knowing you're not going to get a clear answer on the why, but you look for the evidence of God with you in the midst of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, in the beautiful and in the terrible. And that's what our faith offers us is not a clear answer to why, but there's a who in it with us. And that makes a huge difference. There's a ton we don't have time to get into. Would you mind sticking around for a few minutes to do a little bonus conversation?
Sure. No, I'd love to.
You, just to preview it for people who may not stick around, one of the most painful things anybody can go through, one of the greatest losses anybody can go through is the end of a marriage and divorce. And that's a huge feature of this book as well. And I want to talk about that a little bit in your story and how that loss related to the diagnosis with cancer and just how you've navigated all that. I think it would really speak to a lot of people in this audience. So, Amy, thank you for being with us for this main part of the interview and for being so brave in your story. For those who want to pick up your book, it's called The Brave in Between: Notes from the Last Room. It's just stunning, beautiful, and relevant regardless of what challenge you might be facing. There is really wonderful wisdom in here. Thank you for writing it. And thanks for sticking around for this bonus interview.
Oh, I'm happy to. Thanks.
The HOLYPOST podcast is a production of HOLYPOST Media, produced by Mike Strelo, editing by Seth Gorvet. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by subscribing to HOLYPOST Plus at holypost.com/plus. Also, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, HOLYPOST merchandise, and much, much more.